with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
The top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has welcomed assurances from the Metropolitan Police that the pro-Palestinian march planned for this weekend during the nation's annual period of remembrance will be routed away from the Cenotaph in London. Rishi Sunak spoke with the Met Police Chief Sir Mark Rowley today amid concerns that the march could interfere with remembrance commemorations. In a statement, though, the Prime Minister described the planned march as still being disrespectful and offensive. London Mayor Sadiq Khan says the policing of protests shouldn't be political, and the Met insisted it was keeping the weekend's events under constant review. But there was a warning from the Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, who said Sir Mark Rowley will be held accountable for any disruption.
This is the operational responsibility of the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police. The legal powers are his to request that. He has to make a judgment based on all of the factors that he has to take into account. And as the Prime Minister said, it's the Met's responsibility to make sure the march goes off safely, and we'll hold him to account for that.
A war memorial in Greater Manchester is still being guarded by police tonight after protesters sprayed Free Palestine graffiti right across its base. Greater Manchester Police said the Cenotaph in Rochdale was vandalised and poppies were removed yesterday afternoon. It's currently a crime scene. Both the police and Rochdale Council have condemned the violence as criminal disrespect, which is totally unacceptable. A Labour government minister has resigned from the shadow front bench in protest at Sir Keir Starmer's position on the Israel-Hamas war. Imran Hussein's resignation letter said, "It has become very clear that my view on the ongoing humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza differs substantially from the position you have adopted." Meanwhile, it's emerged tonight that the organiser of this weekend's Armistice Day anti-Israel march worked for Sir Keir Starmer until this week. It's being reported that the Secretary of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, Ben Soffa, was also the Labour Party's head of digital organising until just a few days ago. Now, in other news, the government's long-running dispute with rail unions that's led to widespread train strikes over recent months may soon be over. After talks between the Rail Delivery Group and the RMT union, a plan's now been set out in what's being described as a mutually agreed way forward. It includes a pay rise backdated to 2022 and job security guarantees. The RMT says it's a welcome development. Members will now vote on whether or not to accept the offer. This is GB News across the UK and now across Europe. A warm welcome to our new viewers and listeners away from the UK who are tuning in for the very first time tonight via satellite. Details on how to stay in touch at gbnews.com.
Hello and welcome to Headliners, your first look at Thursday's newspapers. I'm Andrew Doyle. Joining me tonight, two top comedians. We've got Steve N. Allen and Lewis Schaefer. Welcome both. You look very smart, Lewis. You've got elephants on your ties. Is to please your lady followers?
No, it's in sadness with what's happened in America with the Republicans this past.
Because the elephant is a symbol of which party? Is it
the Republican Party?
Oh, I thought it was to do with your lady. Because isn't a ground-up tusk an aphrodisiac? I think.
It's worth a try, even if it's not.
Well, I would give it a go.
First of all, I don't have a lady. And I think all the women out there need to know that.
He's free and single. That's actually not true, is it? Anyway, let's move on. We're going to have a look at the front pages before we start. The Daily Mail is leading with PM tells Met Chief, on your head be it. We're going to get into that in just one moment. The Sun, where have all the poppies gone? The Guardian is leading with Starmer fights to control party as shadow ministers threaten to quit. The Times has Braverman Brands Met biased over Gaza March. The Eye News has Tories accuse Home Secretary of fueling UK far-right anger. And finally, the Daily Star, I found Bigfoot in Wales. Those are your front pages. OK, we're going to kick off with Thursday's Daily Mail. Steve, what are they leading with?
It's, all about the Met Chief, on your head be it. Rishi Sunak warned that Britain's top policeman, that he will be held accountable if there's any trouble at the protest. It's interesting how it's become political. It's also, I think, there's part of, imagine that meeting, that high-pressured 45-minute meeting, where there's a strong chance that Mark was sat there thinking, I could just wait until you don't have the job.
Yes.
It's difficult to have teeth when there's a chance that you're not in charge.
What could Rishi Sunak do at this point? I mean, the thing is, there's been a lot of pressure on him to ban the march outright. Yeah. And, we are a liberal society, so he's not going to go that far. But whatever he does, he will be castigated for. Is that not right?
Well, and maybe this is Rishi's move, to move it all onto the police.
Yes.
And then make it their decision and go, oh, look, they decided not to ban it. I mean, how could you ban it? As you say, the principle is, if you start banning protests, it's a slippery slope. What happens when they want to ban the protests you want to attend?
Well, exactly. He has said to the police they should use robust powers and that they should ensure that the remembrance events are not affected and that kind of thing.
But how could the police make an argument that this weekend should be more violent than last weekend or the weekend before? This is not the first of these pro-Palestinian protests every Saturday.
Tricky, isn't it? Lewis, do you feel for Rishi Sunak here? I mean, he's in a bit of a dilemma, isn't he?
Well, I don't really understand how politics work in this country. I mean...
Well, I'm glad I asked you then.
Yeah, because, and I don't think the people do either. Who does this guy, Mark Rowley, work for? He's head of the Metropolitan Police. Who hires him? How is he given a job? He must be given a job by Rishi Sunak.
Yes, but he's also answerable to Rishi Sunak.
Yes, so he could be fired. So if I go in and I say something, and I go to my boss, Andrew, and I say, Andrew, and you go, no, don't do that, and I do it, you're going to fire me.
We have a very strict hierarchy here at GB News, which we observe, which I don't think is the case when it comes to politicians or the police. I think there's a bit more back and forth. Is that right?
Yeah, and look, all of a sudden his boss would change when there's an election. So it doesn't quite work that the boss is just the Prime Minister.
He has to be. You have to stand by the principles. The principles always have to be the same, don't they?
Well, that's
a messy situation.
And then the question is, as a free speech absolutist, should these people be allowed to protest? And I think they should be allowed to protest if they're citizens. I think I don't think people who have just come to this country on any visa except for citizens should be allowed to protest against
Lewis,
the policy.
Out of interest, what is your citizenship status?
This has nothing to do with me.
Well, no, just out of interest. Are you a UK citizen?
I have lived in this country for 23 years. I don't think this is any of your business.
Very much not answering that question.
Not answering the question, because you've done a lot of protests, haven't you? You did that whole green space protest in Peckham.
But it was when I protest, it's different.
I'm trying to look for some kind of consistency here. I think it sounds like you're a bit of a hypocrite, Lewis Schaefer.
What gives you the right to say that, Andrew?
Well, you know, we can have this out in the break because it's getting ugly already. Let's move on to the front cover of The Guardian. What have we got here? Lewis, you've got this one.
Did people think that last section was funny enough? That you knew that I was kidding? That I'm basically saying, I don't think I should be allowed to protest.
You don't have citizenship, actually.
No, I do not have citizenship.
You have 2 children, and you thought that they would give you citizenship. You thought they'd be anchor babies.
I didn't want citizenship. And now maybe I do want citizenship. Maybe I do.
You're going the wrong way about it.
Lewis, what is on the front cover of The Guardian?
Starmer, this is the other side. This is from the Labour side. Obviously, the Tories are having their problems. Starmer fights the control party as shadow ministers threaten to quit. This is one of those, this is a Guardian story. It's got no facts in it. It doesn't mention anyone's name who are forcing Starmer. There's obviously unhappiness.
I think it does.
I don't think it does. Well, it says that Imran Hussein quit.
Yes.
But it said that there are many others, at least 15 other ministers.
Oh, so it's been quite vague about it. But the point
the story is.
Yeah, but the point is sometimes with these political stories you can only get the sort of vague outline of what's going on from Westminster. The point is that they won't be lying, there are a substantial number of parliamentarians who are angry with Starmer.
Of course, because this is the party that represents, you know.
No, I don't know what you mean, Lewis. You have to.
It's the party that represents people who generally support Palestine.
Okay, right, that's a delicate way of putting it. What do you think, Steve?
Well, I think it's also the party that loves to absolutely rip itself apart just before an election where things might go in its favour.
It does, doesn't it?
Classic move.
I mean, it has always been a divided party. I mean, you know, it's only recently that Keir Starmer has upset a lot of members of his party by acknowledging that he knows what a woman is. You know, which, you know, even that was risky. Never mind once you go into Israel-Palestine.
Yeah, and there's a big chunk of reality that you just want to scream at them. Look, these are important issues, have your debates, but whatever you force Keir Starmer to say or not say won't actually have a material effect in the Middle East. Well, he's not even the Prime Minister.
No, well, but isn't this the problem with the Labour Party generally? It has such sort of extreme wings to it. You know, the left of the party doesn't agree on anything with the right of the party. They are really, effectively, I think the party should probably split and be done with it.
Do you know what? And I think politics could work that way if we didn't have our silly first-past-the-post thing. The same's true of the Conservatives. They could split into the different groups, your common-sense ones, your Eurosceptic, all of that. But you can't afford to split because you need to just be in one of the two parties that might...
I agree with you. I think we should have proportional representation. Yeah. Lots of smaller parties and coalitions like they do in Europe. Works perfectly well there.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And you take countries that have that, which is what Italy used to have, and Israel has that, where the craziest political parties have to suck up, you know, whatever, the main parties have to suck up to the little parties.
Well, I still think it's a more democratic approach.
It isn't. It's a question of whether things are worked out publicly in openness, or whether it's behind closed doors. Yes. Whether you take a party that says we support Palestine and then the party that says it doesn't, and then behind closed doors they've got to knock out a deal.
OK, let's move on now to the front cover of Thursday's Times. Steve, story about bad bosses here. What's this?
Yeah, a meddling boss could really be the death of you. They've done some tests where they measured your blood pressure and your pulse rate and your cholesterol and all these things. And if you're being micromanaged, it's going to kill you. Which I
Is that right?
Well, it's bad for you.
Well, and why is it particularly... why is it any more stressful than, say, a micromanaging spouse, for instance?
No, well, do you know what? That's a very interesting question, because this research in no way says that a micromanaging spouse won't kill you as well.
Right, OK.
So you might have hit upon the weakness in the research.
It's not... Why is this front-page story? Because, I mean, all it's basically saying is that, you know, work is stressful and stress can kill you, which we all know anyway, you know?
Yeah, but I think it's really saying being micromanaged by a boss is a lot of stress.
Oh, right.
Whereas maybe we should have said, just shrug it off. You can't shrug it off. You've got a person who's in charge of you running your thing.
So, Lewis, the best bosses are the ones that let their employees get on with it. You have often accused me of being too interfering in your performance. I constantly give you feedback, very negative.
Yes.
I've already criticised your elephant tie because it is ridiculous and we're trying to be a serious channel here.
Yeah.
What do you make of this story?
I think you're just jealous because I'm actually selling this tie. It's going to be on my website within the next few days.
Are you going to sign it?
I will sign it. I'll take a picture of it, and you can have this tie. It's called Louis Schaefer's Tie Collection.
Right.
And
Not for me, Louis.
I'm not going to tell you where I got. Anyway, the point is that why is it on the cover of the Times? It's such a non-story because it's on the cover of the Times because it's saying that markers for inflammation and for cholesterol go up when somebody is micromanaged, and there are drugs for this.
Well,
so that's what the Times is.
So there's drugs to be sold.
The Times are the
Steve's
biggest.
already sceptical about that.
And this study was done by Harvard University. So you know it's probably
Lewis
rubbish.
never trusts anything out of Harvard University. It's one of the best universities in the world. Steve, you've got to counter this nonsense.
Oh, I just counter the general concept of saying, here's a fact. I'm not going to argue the fact. I'm just going to say, oh, it's from a place I don't like, or it's in a newspaper.
It's the genetic fallacy. That's exactly what.
No, it's the authority. it's the opposite of appeal to authority.
Okay, right.
And that's what they do. That's what Harvard is, like all appeal to authority. But if you question, I'm questioning the appeal to authority.
Don't shoot down the facts. Don't even talk about the authority.
Well, I said the facts, which is they're trying to sell stuff. So
Lewis, did you by any chance apply to Harvard and not get in? I think we've hit on it. I think we have. Okay, we're going to move on now.
Harvard was so far away.
To the front cover of the Star now. Lewis, you've got this story.
Yeah, this is, I found Bigfoot in Wales. Rather surprising news from Sasquatch. I didn't even know that Sasquatch was in England. and there's a fact, Exhibit B. You have to believe it. It's a footprint.
Size 23 footprint. I mean, looking at the photo, that looks like someone made that.
Well,
to be honest,
I recognise my own footprints like this. You know, when you're walking on a muddy day, you go, what?
Yeah.
You thought you were safe.
And you've slipped. And
that's
that's
exactly
what it
what
is. This is not a story. This is like those crop circles. Someone has gone out there and they've made it and they've, probably sold the story to the Star. Probably.
Not a bad idea, actually.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. Let's make some. OK, that is all we've got time for in this section of the show. But coming up, we're going to be talking about bad protesters, bad census questions, and bad robots. Don't go anywhere.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Hello, welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Thursday's newspapers. I'm still Andrew Doyle, and here is still Steve Allen, and unfortunately, still Lewis Schaefer. Let's continue with the stories. Don't get grumpy, Lewis. We're going to kick off this section with the Telegraph, and the vaccine has gone under the microscope.
Yeah, and it's not looking good for it. Oxford AstraZeneca COVID jab was defective, claims landmark legal case. Victims of VITT, vaccine-induced immune thrombocytopenia and thrombosis.
Right.
We all were grateful I spent the time to read that out, because now we're all so much wiser. Look, this vaccine is linked to blood clots.
Yes.
We know that. It is also linked to saving 6 million people's lives across the planet.
So isn't the question, and no one is anymore denying that there can be very dangerous side effects, although they only happen in a minority of cases. So that's the situation.
Yes, I mean, we kind of knew that, and that is still the case.
The question is, to what extent did AstraZeneca communicate that? Yeah. And to what extent did were the government aware of this possibility in advance? That's the question,
and how swiftly did they act on it? Given the places like Germany said, actually, this vaccine shouldn't be used for people under 60,
40, I think,
they would name it. Then we went under 40, shouldn't have it a month later. Maybe we should have acted quicker. Maybe we had a bit of hubris to it, because at the time there was a lot of we're getting all the right decisions right, and look, we've made a vaccine, blah, blah, splendid.
Well, I suppose a lot of people are angry because it wasn't really necessary to have a vaccine at all under a certain age, because it wasn't affecting young people. It was the vulnerable, it was the elderly, you know.
And to be offered it should have been fine. To be coerced into having it should have not been fine. And there is also another thing in here. They make the point about communicating the improved safety of it.
Yes.
And they say that AstraZeneca didn't use the absolute figure, they used the relative figure. But without looking, can you define for me the definitions of the absolute and relative terms?
Absolutely not, and I wouldn't attempt to.
So maybe that kind of communication wouldn't have affected you that much anyway?
No, maybe not. What do you think about this, Lewis? I mean, it is absolutely tragic, of course, for people who've lost loved ones.
I think you haven't done your job, Andrew.
Oh, yes.
Because according to Ofcom rules, there has to be balance on this show.
Well, that's why I've gone to you.
Okay, and the balance on this show is that many people don't think any lives were saved by the vaccine, let alone 6 million, which is a very interesting number that was chosen, 6 million. It's very evocative. And that we'd be better off if we had no vaccines at all, because it might have killed more people. And not only that, they entrusted AstraZeneca with this vaccine when they'd never done a vaccine before.
Well, Lewis, you've had your moment of balance.
Was
I'm going
that
to go back to
balance?
Steve, because that's clearly not the case. It's clearly the case that the vaccine did offer protection to people.
Yeah. And when you're saying we'd be better off with no vaccines, do you just mean about this, or in general in life? Vaccines have clearly saved people's lives.
Yeah.
They call this thing the risk profile.
You ask a question.
They say the thing about risk profile, an acceptable safety profile. Clearly, when in the article you're reading details of someone who's had a clot on the brain that's ruined his life, the idea of a safety profile, you think, no, there is no profile that should be acceptable. But obviously, if you are having, it's like 3 billion doses have been dished out, and the number of people who've claimed is in the 140 kind of figure. If that is in any way a representative figure, because why would they not have come forward and said, I've had some negative effects of this? Look, you get confused sometimes. I'm not saying this is what happened in this case, but if you gave everyone in this country an injection tomorrow, waited a week and saw who died, you'd get some people dying.
Yeah, 10,000 die a week.
Exactly.
Basically.
So this is why this is messy stats.
Yeah.
And it's very easy just to say the kind of, it might have killed more people than it saved. That might's doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Do you know what? The truth is, people knew way back then. This is COVID-19. It was a flu virus, a flu that from 2019, and we are giving out this vaccine in 2021.
So if
we're a bit late.
From being wrong.
Well, I'm saying it's a flu in quotation marks, because it was barely even a flu, let alone what a flu is.
Right,
I think, Steve, Lewis, you owe everyone an apology.
No, he does not.
You owe everyone an apology out there for being so dogmatic about the vaccines when more and more people, every single day, people are
Lewis, you can't make that accusation when you are being about as dogmatic as it is possible to be.
But I was dogmatic at a time, and people said, no, you're being a horrible person because you don't believe in the stuff that we're telling you.
That's not why you're a horrible.
And Steve...
Moving on to The Guardian, worrying news now. This is Armistice Day. Lewis, now, this has been reported in all sorts of different ways.
Right.
And I know we covered it a little bit earlier, but this is specifically about the implication that far-right groups are going to call on supporters, turn up at the event. What do you make of this?
Well, I make of it, it's The Guardian, and The Guardian is saying basically anybody who is against this protest is a member of the far right, so they're slurring, and they have every right to. That's The Guardian.
So this is an issue, isn't it, Steve? Because I've looked through this article, and they do seem, from what I can see, to conflate genuine far-right groups, like this offshoot of the BNP, with, for example, Turning Point UK, which is not a far-right group. So it doesn't seem to know what far-right is, and I would like to see a definition of that, particularly when it's in the headline.
Yes, but some of the people they talk about are far-right as well. Yeah, you're right. So they are conflating it. The general point about some people wishing to have a protest against a protest...
That seems fine to me.
Because as we've sat here minutes ago saying, look, you can't pick and choose your protests. So maybe The Guardian's doing it. I hopefully don't fall into that hypocritical trap. I won't say this protest shouldn't go ahead because I don't say the other
Right. Where I stand on this is I don't think any protest ought to be banned, but I do support the notion of counter-protest. If you disagree, that's the way that we do things in a liberal democracy. I don't think there's a problem here. I think what's interesting here is, and what is a little bit dangerous, is when The Guardian and publications like The Guardian conflate these terms and throw out terms like far-right, you know, where it's... And they make it plausible because some of the people they mention are far-right, and some of them definitely aren't. And that makes it seem like anyone who turns up to oppose these marches is far-right. It's simply not true. A lot of people are just concerned about vandalism of the cenotaph or disruption of remembrance event. That's a legitimate concern, isn't it?
Is that The Guardian is the official newspaper of Team World. And,
I wondered how long it would be. We should play bingo when Lewis says the phrase is Team World, non-story.
This is
Any takers, ladies? That's another one of yours.
This is the war that we're having, and that the Team World wants to suppress Britishness. And the same.
Okay, but let me ask you about that. Yeah. Is it the case that this march has been planned on Armistice Day as a kind of, not just because they want to maximise publicity, but also because it is an affront to the notion of British values and history?
Yes. It could be any of those things. The fact is that the people who are against aiding Palestine are pretty much, I mean, everybody's gassed at the whole thing, but it's basically the people who are against aiding Palestine are people who are who would support the Senate.
Well, actually, I think this is impossible to say. One of the problems here is that a lot of the people going on the pro-Palestine marches and the oppositional marches, actually, there's a lot of dissent within all of those marches.
I don't see one single flag, or one single British flag.
These protests have happened on every Saturday for the last few Saturdays.
Yeah.
So Saturday occurs, but this one is a special Saturday.
You don't think it's insensitive because of the date?
I think it's insensitive, but your point was, do you think this has been planned deliberately?
Well, I was just raising the question rather than making it.
And I think we can't know, but I don't think it's likely because they put that much planning in to start Saturday.
But there are definitely people who've been vandalised. I mean, there was the monument is it in Rochdale?
Yeah,
I think has been vandalised. So there are some people who absolutely hate this country and its traditions and do want to take it. Well, I suppose piggyback onto any opportunistic movement.
Have you seen anything that said we love Britain and we want a free Palestine? Have you seen anything?
Well, that would be interesting.
Like that?
You know what I'd be more interested in is pro-Palestine protesters that stood up in those crowds and said, we denounce Hamas, first and foremost. Yeah. Because if you're pro-Palestine, the worst people for the Palestinians are Hamas, who will use them as human shields, who will commit acts of mass murder and torture, knowing full well that innocent Palestinians will die as a result. So why can't they do that?
Yeah, and if you want a ceasefire...
you release the hostages. How about that? Or not take them in the first place? Even better. I mean,
because there's tremendous support for Hamas. I mean,
is there? I mean, there are some.
Obviously.
I have seen some people openly supporting Hamas, and I find that disgusting.
Yeah.
I don't know how widespread that is. I would like to think not.
And I think in Gaza there's tremendous support. Just because we don't like those people, that doesn't mean that their people don't like those people.
OK, well, we're moving on to the Times now. Some people have had some difficulty Filling out the census, Steve.
Yeah, the ONS digs in over misunderstood trans census question. The department admits that non-English speakers may have been confused by this gender question.
This is the Office of National Statistics, who obviously run the census.
And they stand by the data. So the question, could they, in the actual article, it's way down the bottom, you get to the actual question.
What was the question?
Is the gender you identify with the same as your sex registered at birth?
Right.
I mean, it's a long question. It's not like, would you not say that the difference between your gender and sex is not non-homologous? It's not that much of a tricky question.
So I understand your point. The question, I mean, they're making the point that foreign people who speak English as a second language struggle with the question. I think the stats here say that, according to this, the data released showed that those who speak English not well were most likely to be counted as transgender at 2.2%. compared with 0.4% whose main language is English. So it does suggest that it was a language issue.
Yeah, well, there's certainly some stats. The stats don't look right.
No.
So, but then I say, well, that requires further looking into it. You can't say these stats are definitely wrong because I don't like the look of them. Some of the arguments they try and come up with to try and make this square fit the circle is to say that maybe we've got trans refugees coming to the UK in greater number.
I mean,
there's also an argument.
Even you know that's ridiculous.
Oh, yeah, of course. I also think the other one's ridiculous, which is the age demographics. Younger people tend to have a higher incidence of gender issues, and migrants tend to be younger. None of that's going to fit this data.
You would acknowledge, would you not, that most of the countries where migrants are coming from don't have a particularly high proportion of people identifying as non-binary? I think they're more worried about war and things like that.
It's not about the destination, about the journey. And on the way here...
Really?
Honestly, you look at this and all the article is saying this is clearly wrong. I'm saying it looks wrong, but that doesn't mean you can prove it wrong.
No, but it's clearly wrong.
Survey at Lee. It is clearly wrong.
It
is wrong, isn't it? Help me out here.
It's totally wrong. The census was done in 2021. This is how I know it's wrong. Because when Andrew called me to be on his Fakakta Free Speech Nation thing, and we were discussing the trans-sex gender issue.
Yes.
I couldn't get my head around what was the difference myself. And if Louis Schaefer, who's super well-educated, knows everything.
Yeah, he doesn't even know.
I didn't even know.
I don't have an objection to having a question about gender identity on the census because we have all sorts of questions about religious belief on the census. But I think when they put it in I think it's where they've put it. I think they put it alongside sex and vital statistics and those kind of things. And it's a religious belief, effectively, the belief that you've got a gendered soul. That's a quasi-religious belief. So why not put it along with the Jedi and the Christian and all the rest of it? That would make it clearer, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, but you can pick the stats out just by looking at it. You look at the question that's being answered and disregard for whatever you need the info for. I'm not sure which part of the form means that much. Really.
Okay.
At least do a survey that looks at age, ability to speak English, ability to understand that question, and then you'd actually have some reason to...
Do you know what would have been a better question? Not the question which they put here, which is the gender you identify with the same as your sex? Firstly, do you believe in gender identity? Yes, no. If no, go to here.
But what is gender identity? People don't know
much easier.
These.
Go on, sorry?
People don't know these terms. They don't know gender identity. They don't know what that means, really, and they don't know what gender is.
I suppose, but particularly if you're learning the language. Anyway, that is all we've got time for in part 2. But coming up, we've got a Carol Vorderman controversy, Lloyd's of London reparations, and a long-anticipated game finally confirmed. Stay tuned to find out which one. I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows...
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
And welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Thursday's newspapers. We're going to kick off this section with The Independent. Lewis, this is another BBC scandal. Sort of.
Oh, which one are we?
This one is about...
Carol Vorderman.
Carol Vorderman.
Carol Vorderman, whose great-grandfather was involved in discovering beriberi.
Is that right?
Yes, in Indonesia. She's got a very... I mean, he didn't really discover it, but he proved it.
Yes.
That you can look up Vorderman. It's very interesting, Wikipedia. Anyway, so Carol Vorderman, who is... she's from Wales, which I didn't know, is that she was been fired for expressing opinions on social media. She had a show every Saturday.
Yeah, radio
show on the BBC. And the BBC said to her, if you, from this point onward, if you open your mouth, you're going to be fired. And so she opened her mouth and they fired her. And the reason they fired her, because the BBC, they don't want to give the game away, because Carol Vorderman is totally leftist, is they don't want to give the game away that the BBC is captured, to use your word, by the new world.
Well, let me just bring Steve in here, as someone you've worked on the BBC, haven't you? So, I mean, do you think it's fair that, I mean, not just that, obviously, during the shows, presenters have to aim for impartiality, but when it comes to their own private social media accounts, that kind of thing, do you think they ought to be prescribed in this way?
No, I don't know why we think just because we pay towards their paycheck, we get to make sure that none of their tweets ever disagree with what we say.
But just to come back on what Lewis was saying, isn't the problem here that if they were to give them free rein to say what they want to social media, everyone would realise that every single person they employ is left-wing?
Well, I don't think that's true of everyone I work with when I worked at the BBC.
Well, it's certainly
the majority,
it's certainly the majority. And then they might have to rethink their employment.
I wouldn't mind as well, in the same way that Andrew Neil was hosting on the BBC during Brexit, tweeting his opinions, but I didn't cry about it and go, oh, no, it's not fair, he's on the BBC. The thing I also, as a taxpayer, fund the paycheck that goes to MPs, but I don't expect them to never disagree with me politically.
But the state broadcaster has a responsibility for political impartiality.
It's output, definitely.
Yeah.
This is the thing, it's output, definitely, but the private tweets of a private person, why do we think we get to control them?
On the other hand, Lewis, it's not really a free speech issue because they've signed a contract saying their bosses have said if you want this job, you have to...
Contracts have been retrospectively changed.
But that can happen with contracts.
Yeah.
You know, that can happen, and you can choose to say, well, no, sorry then, the job's not for me. So I don't think it is free speech, really.
Yeah.
I think
well,
it's
she
fair.
didn't do that. She was fired. She kept on talking. The fact is the BBC is the state broadcaster, is the state propaganda underarm, and they want to keep their place. And the way they keep their place is by pretending that nobody is.
I knew you were going to use the phrase state propaganda.
They are the state propaganda.
I'll take a drink when he says state propaganda, Ralph.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you mark that off. Everybody knows this. It's about time somebody said it in this country.
I weren't there. Do you think I was spouting state propaganda?
Do you know what? 6 million died or lives were saved from COVID. Yeah, you're state propaganda.
I think what you're saying, Lewis, it's an opinion you don't agree with. That's your issue.
You know what it is? If you are lovely, Steve.
Oh, thank you.
You're lovely, and I would say a great guy. And but the truth is the fact is, if you work for the BBC, you are working for state propaganda.
Goodness me! I was on the moral maze at the BBC for a number of years.
State propagandist.
So there we go. All right. Anyway, we're going to move on now. Thank you, Lewis. To this story, which is in the Sun, and this will definitely make you want to get a dental checkup. Steve, what's this?
Yeah, this is mouth cancer death rates have increased 46% amid fears that there's a lack of NHS dentists.
They are difficult to find nowadays.
And we do need to fix this because there are areas of the country where people aren't in work. And I'll tell you one thing that might be holding them back: a face that looks like you've been in a fight.
Yeah.
Teeth, as much as it seems like, oh, why should we pay for their dentistry? I'm sure we'd have a better nation if everyone had better teeth. But it's terrifying, isn't it? Mouth cancer.
Well, I didn't even think about that. I didn't realise that dentists check for that kind of thing.
Yeah, and they get to see... My mum had a scare years and years ago. She had some little lumps and they did a little biopsy.
So do they check just naturally in a checkup?
They go and have a look, yeah.
Do they?
I mean, there's a thing in the article saying they should do more special checks.
Yeah.
But at least they're already checking. And it's a worry for everyone. When it comes to mouth cancer, most are caused by smoking. I don't smoke. Then they're caused by alcohol abuse. I don't drink. And performing oral sex. I need to get checked.
You do, Steve. Lewis, what do you make of this
I think Steve is always wrong. Why do you have to be wrong? But people believe you because of your university degree and your whole nice.
Is this going back to the fact you didn't get into Harvard?
The fact is, here's the most important thing to know: is it isn't that dentists are going to say dentists can get there early and maybe cut something out, but beyond cutting things out, there's no cure for cancer.
Yeah, but if it's found early, 9 out of 10 people survive mouth cancer. If it's not found early, it's 50-50.
And number two, you mentioned 2 of the major causes for cancer, but there's way more cancer. Cancer is growing as smoking goes down, as alcohol levels have flattened out, because things like high carbohydrate diets, spicy food, toothpaste. I'm not saying they definitely do, but they need to be looked at. You should Google all of these things. What
Lewis
causes
with
mouth
his incredible
cancer.
medical knowledge again.
Yeah.
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 Where is your doctorate from?
My doctorate is from Dr. Google.
There we go, Dr. Google.
Thousands of hours of watching YouTube.
And we all know the best thing you can do when you're ill is Google your own symptoms. We're going to move on to the Telegraph now. Mock the Week in trouble for mocking someone, Steve.
Yeah, they've apologised the host has apologised to Gabby Logan for jokes likening her to a transvestite. It was during a podcast interview that Dara O'Brien said, I think there was stuff that was said that you simply wouldn't do now. He actually basically said it was a different time. And can we just take this opportunity, instead of to then join in with the mocking and go, no, let's all just agree, yeah, it was a different time. And you can't judge material of the past on
was
modern
it a
day
different time? It was 2008.
2008. Yeah,
that's not that much of a different time. It's not like they didn't have the internet then, and they didn't have, they were all wearing clogs or something.
It was such a different time. No, but if you let them have that, then we can really just have this rule of, it was a different time.
For everybody, is that what you're saying?
So I could say that about Lewis's last gig at my club. It was a different time. That was in January.
But it would mean we don't have to rewrite all of the books.
This is mad, isn't it, Lewis? I mean, the thing about this, she says she wasn't upset by the joke, right? I think a lot of people who are celebrities in the public eye, they accept that part of the deal is you're going to get mocked on these kinds of shows, right? And I think that's a fair deal in return for all the money and the prestige.
Right. So why should Dara O'Brien apologize?
Well, he shouldn't really.
But then again, he did. And the point is that he feels he has to, and everybody's apologizing for things in the past. And to call somebody a transvestite, I mean, he's basically, because some transvestites are very attractive.
Yeah, this could be a compliment.
Yeah, it could
be. Says it's not just him. I think it's Frankie Boyle as well. But,
and now there's someone like Frankie Boyle, God bless him, he's that woman who I'm spending a lot of time with, sorry ladies, who loves Frankie Boyle. And Frankie Boyle now is holier than thou among the left-wingers like yourself, Steve. He's like a great guy. Louis Schaefer's not a great guy.
Well, let's ask Steve about that. I mean, do you think there's a place still in comedy for that kind of, I suppose, meaner, punching down style of comedy? Because there are still people doing that on the circuit.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly what I was going to say. It's still there.
Yeah.
Quite often, whenever debates happen on TV about what comedy you can and can't do.
Yes.
They're just talking about BBC output for some reason.
Yes.
Whereas comedy exists all over the shop. Loads of it's still happening. It was a joke. The second joke he did was about having man hands. To be fair, Seinfeld did a whole episode on man hands, and that was a different time.
Yeah, but that goes back to the what? The 90s. 90s.
Crazy.
Still not really a different time, is it? This is the thing I don't understand.
I still wear the same outfits.
I think what's actually happening is we're in a kind of cycle, a little pocket of moment. You know, I think in another 10, 15 years, those sort of jokes will be back again, and people will be saying, "Oh, do you remember when we all used to apologise for making jokes? Wasn't that stupid?" Old time. I think that's what will happen.
No. So in the interview, Doris talks about who the victim of a joke is, who you're and the victim of the joke here is not a transvestite.
No, it's a very rich celebrity.
Yeah, and so that
changes it.
It won't be too long until you can joke about rich celebs. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, probably not. OK, well, gaming news now from the Daily Mail. The long-anticipated Grand Theft Auto 6 is confirmed. Lewis, it's not a game I've ever played. I think I draw the line at Tetris, if I'm honest.
Yes, and I looked at this and I said, why are you giving me this story? Because that's not a game that I've ever played. I have actually played it. My son played it. It was the first game that he had.
Well, it's not appropriate, because isn't it sort of very violent?
It is
sexually
brutal.
Explicit?
It's brutal. People are rewarded for committing random acts of violence.
Well, this should not be encouraged.
It's basically Black Lives Matter.
Why did you give this to your son? How old was he?
He was about maybe 12 years old.
So you're an irresponsible parent?
I didn't know. It was, but it was.
How many, pimps did you have to see being beaten up with a baseball bat to realise this isn't right for my 12-year-old boy?
So you know what? Try taking it away from him. And because besides, I was seeing him so infrequently, I was just do anything to get him into my house.
Well, this is the problem, isn't it? In a nutshell, it's the parents. But look, anyway, the big news about Grand Theft Auto 6 apparently is there's a female protagonist.
Yes, isn't that so good that finally there is representation for young girls who want to go out there and beat up prostitutes?
Well, women can be violent too, and ought to be encouraged to be.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't work, does it? It doesn't work at all.
No, but it's a Peggy 18 one. So if you're not under 18,
as Lewis has just proven, everyone.
Who is Peggy?
It's your first wife.
That's the question. Get to the bottom of that one,
Lewis.
Yeah,
I judge you. Let's move on. OK, we're going to go on to the next story now, and this one is from the Metro. This is about renting properties. Steve, this is actually a bit worrying, this story.
White people are still 36% more likely to be rented a room than black people. Here's what they did with the test. They made an application that was identical other than the ethnicity and name. Zuri and Lizzie. Lizzie got loads more replies saying, yeah, come around, check out the place. And look, I think it's so tempting to think, oh, no, we need to unpick this and prove it wrong. The closest I could think of is that I don't know if the gender was specified on the application. Lizzie, we definitely know.
Yes.
Zuri's maybe misunderstood more, because I remember years ago when I was a single bloke trying to rent a room, it was like being a leper. No one wanted.
There is that, actually. A lot of people don't want male... So there is possibly that. You see, because I'm very sceptical. Whenever they see stories about, systemic racism, it's normally it's evidence-free and it's just an allegation or suggestion. This does look dodgy, actually. And it looks to me, because the race of the applicant was clear. It looks to me... I mean, it could just be that these are racist landlords.
Yeah, it could. Well, yes, there are 36% of landlords are racist or unconscious bias skews you. Here's the problem. It's a decision where you're almost arbitrarily picking who to rent the room or flat to.
Yes.
So who knows how easy it is for bias.
But you're right, actually. They should have made both of them women or both of them men, because I would much rather have a female applicant than a male applicant as a landlord, because women don't mess up the place as much, right? Is that fair, Lewis?
Well, I used to rent rooms in my flat. I was a slum landlord.
Is that right?
As well as a slum tenant, because I was living there, so it was a bit of a slum.
Yes.
And I would rent to every single ethnic group, to black people, Chinese people, we had Japanese people, we had people, Spanish people, people from all over the world. I would never rent to...
You clearly had a high turnover.
I would never rent to an English person.
Really?
Yeah, because they knew their rights. They wouldn't massage my feet. They kept the door closed.
OK, moving on. We're going to have to go to a break now, but coming up in the final section, we've got cats, we've got chocolate, and we've got Elon Musk's Neuralink brain chip. See you in a moment.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Well,
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie, second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Thursday's newspapers. Let's begin with the Metro. Some super important news. Steve, what's this?
We're going to get an amazing view of Uranus next week.
Fancy that.
And
Steve.
Uranus, it says, Uranus is a bit weird one, to be honest. Stargazers rejoice. We're going to get a spectacular view of Uranus on Monday. Basically, because the Earth whips around the sun quicker than all the planets in the outer solar system.
Yes.
Once a year, we get closer to all of the outer planets. And
because you never see this planet, do you?
Suppose not. It's quite far away.
It's far away.
And you'll be able to see it with your eyesight, but if you get some binoculars or telescope on it, it'll be great. We are slightly closer to it. But the entire article is basically just bottom jokes.
Yes.
But the ones that they've missed out are saying, let's have a look. Uranus is so big I can see it from my backyard. They didn't say that. My plan for Monday night is to just sit down and look at Uranus. Or, once a year, we get closer to Uranus, so we're like a married couple. Maybe they shouldn't have done that joke.
Lewis, what do you think of all this?
I think, you know what, every time I see a planet, first of all, why is Uranus, why does it go slower than the Earth? We don't know. Why is Uranus tilted on its axis?
Are you going to come up because of Team World? That's why.
No,
because
and it's all explained by Velikovsky. V-E-L-I-K.
We don't have time for this.
No,
Lewis.
we don't. But at the end of the day, Venus is one of the most interesting planets because in the Babylonian era, it was completely visible to the sky. It was one of the great planets.
Yes.
And now it's a little dot where you've got to make a
Well, it just reminds us of how small we are in the cosmic.
No, it doesn't, because once upon a time there was a war between Saturn and and Uranus.
You know, I've heard this theory before. It's way too long for this show, so let's move on now. And I'm not censoring you, Lewis. I'm just conscious of time. This is the story from the Daily Mail now. Elon Musk news. He's always getting in the headlines. Lewis, what's this?
Well, he's amazing. Elon Musk has got new money to spend. He wants to break into people's brains.
Well, not quite. He wants to...
That's what he's doing. He's breaking into their brains. He's taking a piece of their skull, and he's going to put a chip in there, and he's going to take people who... It's basically going to control people, which came as a surprise to me, because during this whole COVID thing, I thought the entire world was controlled. Stephen Allen has a chip in his brain. He's got a chip in his...
This is the whole thing about what they call transhumanism.
Yeah.
So effectively, you can have a chip in your brain that means you're part computer, or you've got access to the internet all the time, or whatever.
Cyborg.
Absolutely terrifying. They've tried it on monkeys and pigs. Have any of these monkeys or pigs tried to take over the world? I saw Planet of the Apes.
No, I think this might be remote control pigs and monkeys. How is he not selling those? I know he's rich enough already, but I'd have one of those for Christmas.
Aren't you slightly worried about... I mean, look, why are there thousands of people saying they want to do this?
Well, because it's not about browsing the internet in your head and changing TV channels and all that. It's about giving people the ability to walk when they've got spinal column...
That makes
fractures.
sense to me.
Yeah, and the 11 people they're going to do surgery on are volunteers who need this to hopefully treat some sort...
So that makes sense to me, but it is the slippery slope. Because once you accept that, OK, there's a need for that kind of thing, then suddenly it's, oh, I just want to be smarter, like that girl in the last Terminator film. You know what I mean? I don't know if you get that reference, but that, you know, we end up as cyborgs. We end up as being controlled from a central computer, like the Borg, and we're not human beings anymore.
The Borg's not really controlled by one central... I know eventually in Voyager you end up with a Borg queen, but...
That's what I was referring to.
Originally, it was more of just, we are one.
It's a hive mind.
Yeah.
It's a horrific... Don't pretend it's like a lovely hippie... idea. It's absolutely horrible. Destroy all the robots. Right, let's go on to the Daily Mail now. Steve, would you consider yourself a bad boy?
I'm bad at some things, not the ones that will impress the women. Women really do love bad boys, which is why all the women on Twitter seem to go after Lewis, and he is awful.
Awful.
Yeah, they love me. Girls love me.
Ladies think men who take more risks are sexier, but only for flings. Good news, because that's exactly what we'd like you for. So they've done this research. Scientists have studied 1,300 women, sad, lonely, desperate scientists working out, why can't I find one? And they've found out.
They've found it.
Enough.
Yeah.
They also talk about what you can do to stop yourself cheating. I don't know why that's in this article as well.
What's that got to do with anything?
I don't know, but it's down the bottom, and it's basically try and not cheat. They've got 3 tips.
That's good advice, though.
That's all it is, yeah.
If you try not to cheat... Actually, no, it's the opposite. I think it becomes more attractive then, doesn't it? Lewis, what do you think of all this? I mean, do you think that women are attracted to bad guys? Is that why you put on this bad guy persona?
I'm trying to be as nice as possible.
No, you're not.
I totally am. I think with women who basically this article is saying if you've got a lot of money, come from a rich country, that you go out with a bad boy because you don't care about the money because you're going to get the money from the state. Team World is going to give you the money.
OK, we're going to move on to the Metro now. Fans of Nestle having a bad day. Lewis?
Yeah, Nestle, I don't know. I'm new to this country. I've only been here 23 years, and don't ask about my immigration status. And Nestle, who now owns Caramac, which was a candy bar, which I never heard of.
It's iconic, Lewis, so you should have heard of it.
I never heard of it. So obviously...
They're scrapping Caramac.
They're scrapping
Are they replacing it with something else?
With some other bit of diabetes-causing garbage.
I've never tried a Caramac.
So don't say it's iconic. You've never even had it.
I mean, it's iconic to some people. Some people like it, so it's iconic to them. I mean, it's not like a Whisper bar, which is iconic to me.
I hated it because it's not a chocolate. It fools you into thinking you're about to get a chocolate bar. No chocolate in there at all. It's
what
just
is
like
it?
Caramelly flavoured.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, that sounds fraudulent to me.
Yeah, exactly.
OK, well, we've just got time for one more story very quickly. It's the Daily Mail. Bad news
don't
if you're...
forget...
Lewis. Bad news if you're a lover of cats, Steve.
Yep, having a cat can make you frail in your old age. I've got 2, so I'm not even going to get off this chair properly. They've done research, and by the time you get older, if you have a cat, you could have this Toxoplasma gondii parasite.
So you might have picked up a parasite from the cat?
Yeah, it then goes into little cysts inside your body, waits until your immunity...
I'm sorry, even if that's true, you can't live in fear of cats. They're just one of life's joys.
Everywhere. Do you know this parasite is amazing, though, because when rodents get it, it makes them not afraid of cats.
Really?
So they get eaten by cats, and the parasite ends up back in the cat's gut.
That is quite astonishing and also really deeply horrific.
It is, isn't it?
Lewis, any thoughts on cats?
My thoughts on cats is this is one of those stories. There's too many variables. The number one variable is that people who own cats have basically given up all hope of of life, and they're usually vegetarians. So
there we go. Get yourself some tropical fish.
But don't forget, this is our 2-year anniversary of Headline.
It is. I should say that 2-year anniversary of Headline tonight.
And show the calendar.
I'm afraid we haven't got time to show Lewis.
We have time. It's on the 8th.
Right.
The 8th of November.
Let's have a quick look at Tuesday's front pages before we go. The Mail has PM tells the Met Chief on your head be it. The Sun is leading with where have all the poppies gone? The Guardian, Starmer fights to control party as shadow ministers threaten to quit. The Times has Braverman Brands Met biased over Gaza March. iNews, Tories accuse Home Secretary of fueling UK far-right anger. And finally, the Daily Star, they found Bigfoot in Wales. Apparently, that's all we've got time for. Thank you ever so much to my guests, Steve N. Allen and Lewis Schaefer. We are back tomorrow at 11 o'clock with some other people. And if you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.